All right, hello everybody, and welcome into today's episode of Around the Slice. As we look back on the NFL free agency from a Buffalo Bills perspective, and before we turn the page, if you will, to the 2025 NFL Draft, I wanted to bring on a very special guest to look back at those free agent moves from Brandon Beane and company and Buffalo Bills beat writer Ryan Talbot. First and foremost, Ryan, how are you doing tonight? And thank you for carving out time in. I'm sure your busy schedule to come chat Bills with me.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure to come on, and I'm doing great. It's been a fun off season already, and looking forward to the draft. As you said, that's creeping up on us.
I know, crazy thing. I feel like every offseason we're like, oh, the season's over, the draft month's away, and then here we are, almost April 1st, and oh my God, we're within draft month. So
That's right. Less than a month away, so I can't wait. That's always a favorite time of year for me.
yeah, draft is kind of how I started with content, and I've just grown from there. So,
That's
um,
awesome.
so do you want to just get right into it then?
Yeah, sure. Let's get right into it.
So right off the bat, from a surface level, I wanted to ask you personally, what has been your favorite thing from Bills free agency up to this point thus far? Or rather, what have you found yourself most satisfied with Brandon Beane? It can be a specific signing, situation, anything you want to point out. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of the internal moves, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott from day one have said we want to draft, develop, and re-sign or extend in some of the cases. So first and foremost, the Josh Allen extension, keeping him here long term. Obviously, he had many years left on the deal, but he was grossly underpaid. He had crept into that 14th, 15th highest paid quarterback, where he's coming off of an MVP season. So they wanted to make sure that he got a pay bump. And then to Josh Allen's credit, he said that he was willing to leave money on the table because, what's an extra $4 or $5 million per year when you already are making $55 million on average per season. So that first and foremost sticks out. And then when you look at some of the other re-signings, I think good value across the board. But the Greg Rousseau one stands out. I'm not, I still think that Greg Rousseau has not reached his ceiling. And I know he is not at the type of caliber that the Max Crosbys, the Myles Garretts that are getting 30 plus million per year. But I think within a year, maybe even less than a year, we're going to look back at that extension, 20 million per season, as a really good deal for the Bills because of the going rate for DNs in this league.
Yeah, it sounds like we're on the same page because my favorite thing from Brandon Beane, I've been very satisfied with him. I also want to shout out all the internal contract extensions as well. You mentioned it. The Bills have a very clear philosophy, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott specifically, of draft, develop, and extend. And that's more evident and proven this offseason, if you will, with Khalil Shakir on offense and then Greg Rousseau and now Terrell Bernard on defense. And I'm sure Christian Benford's coming up within the next few weeks or so as well. I want to go back to the Greg Rousseau point because you said something has stuck out to me. My audience and fans already know this about me. I don't like hate Greg Rousseau. I just like him. I don't love him. I've said in the past, and I continue to say, he's not. I wish he was a true game maker, number one pass rusher, but he's not. Am I way off there, or is that a fair assessment?
So you're not off. I mean, he hasn't had a single double-digit sack season yet in his career. He does a lot of things very well, but he's not a game wrecker. I think that's a fair, assessment. He's great though at containing the run, stealing the edge, doing what he's supposed to do. And I think I'm hesitating based on your question here because I do wonder if maybe the Bills system almost hinders him a little bit from being able to pin his ears back more often and get after the quarterback. Because when you do that, sometimes you give up the, contain, and then mobile quarterbacks can break out of the pocket, get big gains, where I think he might just be someone that's following what he's told to do, and he's doing that pretty well. So it's tough because the production overall has not been there. The pressures have been getting better every year, but you want to see the double-digit sacks for sure.
Let me put it to you this way. In my opinion, I think Greg Rousseau would be beneficial to a true game wrecker on the opposite side of him, where he could operate as more of a 1B / number 2.
Yeah, no, I think that's more than fair. And They've made some moves in free agency, which I'm going to talk about here for one of the questions in a little bit.
Yeah.
But one thing that I know it's not a free agent, I know it's not an extension, but going back to this first question, my favorite thing might be some of the coaching additions that this team has made.
Yep.
Ryan Nielsen, who I know he's a senior defensive assistant, but his focus is going to be the defensive line. He's had a lot of really good production with his defensive linemen and his stops. So I'm hoping that he helps Greg Rousseau go to the next level. If Joey Bosa can stay healthy, it's going to help his game out a little bit too, as well as the D lineman, and then Mike Pellegrino too, the cornerbacks coach, the Nichols cornerback coach that they signed away from the Patriots. They kind of swapped Nichols coaches, believe it or not. Patriots signed the one that was with the Bills. The Bills signed Pellegrino. Pellegrino's done a nice job with development too. So some of the coaching additions as well, I feel like have been really good moves by the Bills.
One last point here. While we're on the topic of linebackers and just Terrell Bernard and internal extensions, all that, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Matt Milano contract restructure from last week, because to me it kind of came out of nowhere, and I found it pretty odd that they basically just ripped up the last year of his deal. Is there anything that sticks out to you there, or why they did it now?
I think that they probably went to Milano and they said, here's where we are cap wise. We don't want to part ways with you. We want you to be a part of this roster in 2025, but at the same time, the way that the financials break down, we're not sure that you're still playing at that type of, pay salary, so to speak. So he helps them out a little bit, takes a pay cut. They rip up the last year of the contract. This gives Milano a chance to go out and earn a new deal elsewhere. Well, I shouldn't even say elsewhere, with Buffalo or elsewhere at the end of the season if he plays at a high level. The Bills themselves, they love Milano. They love everything about his game, but he is getting older. He was dinged up a lot last year with injuries, and the year before that as well. So they have to start thinking about, is it, going to be time to turn the page sooner rather than later to Dorian Williams or someone that they might draft in this year's class. You're going to see Ulofoshio get more opportunities to play a depth role in this defense. Joe Andreessen and the young guys are going to get more opportunities in due time. And Milano, unfortunately, it might be the way of, the Jordan Poyers and some of the guys where the Bills say, I'd rather let go of them a year too early than a year too late. And truth be told, pretty much everyone they parted ways with before last year's season looked like the right call in hindsight.
That's very true. So also next few weeks, I don't know how we are, but are we headed towards a massive Christian Benford contract extension, especially where the corner market is going in recently?
It would not surprise me if they get something done with Christian Benford. I think that, just like any negotiation, some are easier than others in terms of what the market is and what the player and the agent are willing to accept. Cornerbacks right now are getting paid handsomely for their services, number one cornerbacks. And I don't think he's going to be up there in the highest paid, but it would not surprise me if he ends up getting a contract that's in that $18 to $21 million per season range with the Bills, or maybe it comes in a little bit less than that with incentives that are attainable. I think they're going to, close the gap, whatever that gap is, because he is very important to this team, and not just in terms of his play, but the overall depth as well right now at corner is a little bit scary.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I've said the past 2 years now, especially this past year in 2024, last year, that Christian Benford is the most elite shutdown corner that nobody knows about. So.
Yeah, he's not a household name by any means. I know he did get one All-Pro vote this past season, but he probably should have received even more than that for the way that he played.
Yeah, now before we move on to the next question, I know we're taking a lot of time here for this question, but it's important to me because a month or so ago, right before the free agency flurry hit, if you will, I talked about this James Cook contract situation, him coming out publicly, all that fun stuff. Quick thoughts on that, because my audience already knows where I'm at, so I want to give you the floor to kind of give your thoughts on the whole James Cook situation.
Yeah, I didn't love the way he went about it, just because the Bills have done a good job of keeping their own in-house, extending them. doing right by their players more times than not, and coming out saying $15 million a year and doubling down on it on X and Instagram. It makes it more difficult to negotiate because, hey, you're going public with this stuff. We want to keep it in house. I don't think he did himself any favors. He was so important to the offense last year that, based on everything McDermott and Bean said at their end of the year pressers, I sat there and said, man, he might be higher up on their extension list than I thought. And then he came out with those comments, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they haven't been able to reach a new deal with him.
I say this as a joke, but not a joke. Is his brother involved in somehow?
You're not the first person to ask me that. Like, is his brother in his ear? I don't know, because I don't want to accuse Delvin Cook of sitting there telling him, hey, you got to go out and get this, get X amount of dollars now. One, I can't blame Delvin or James if that's the case, because the running backs have such a short shelf life that you need to get paid while you can. But his brother was in a similar situation at a point in his career, so it wouldn't surprise me if he gave him some advice, and if his agent gave him that advice. I don't think he just came to that conclusion on his own. I'm sure there are a lot of people that he trusts that he talked to before he came out and made the request public.
Yeah, fair assessment. Moving on, this is kind of a fun question I had in here. What is one under the radar signing from Brandon Beane in the Bills that nobody is talking about nearly enough right now, in your opinion, a specific player?
Yeah, I peeked at yours, and we're on the same page again. It's Derek Forrest. It's the safety from the Washington Commanders. He had really good tape when he started a few years ago with Washington. Kind of flew around the field, made a lot of big plays, good hitter. Someone that when they let him play, he looked great. And then had an injury, new coaching staff this past season, and he got buried on the depth chart. And that happens sometimes. Sometimes new regimes come in, and players that have shown talent for whatever reason just maybe don't fit the mold of what the new coaching regime is trying to do. Maybe because he was coming off of an injury, they didn't trust him to be able to play out there on a consistent basis. I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like for what they signed Forrest at, he's going to be able to come in, compete for a job. I know that, Taylor Rapp, they like his game a lot. Cole Bishop's someone that they want to have a hand, I don't want to say hand a starting job to, but they want him to be starting. They drafted him in the second round. That being said, Rapp gets banged up all the time. So you want to have a competition this summer, and maybe Forrest can push him in that role. And the same with Bishop. They're not just going to hand him a job because he's a former second-round pick. We know that because they never handed Kyrie Elam a job.
They don't do that.
They don't do that. So as much as they would like for that to happen, this is going to be a competition this summer. And if Forrest comes in and makes plays, there's no reason for me to think that he can't steal one of those starting positions or maybe take one in season.
If you look at this, for all intents and purposes, this Derek Forrest contract is pretty much like a vet minimum prove-it deal. I mean, it's 1 year, $1.3 million, right? So he's not going to come in and blow the doors off anybody. The thing that stood out to me, is he the most flashy, most athletic, rangy, ball skills hybrid safety in the world? No. But he's really physical and a surefire tackler. And you know that Sean McDermott loves those surefire tacklers, which seemingly has been a problem for this defense for a number of years now, especially the last couple. But like you said, I know people are going to say, Aiden, that's ridiculous. But I know this team loves Taylor Rapp, and, they're paying Taylor Rapp like he's a starter. But I personally would not be like jaw on the floor, overly shocked if somehow Derek Forrest, come week one, is the starting strong safety for this team. Based on what you said, am I way off on that, or is that like a hot take right now that could come to fruition?
I don't think it's a hot take, just based on the locker room right now and who they have. And, they re-signed DeMar Hamlin. Hamlin's a fine depth piece. He has starting experience. There's no Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde type of situation in Buffalo right now where you're sitting there saying those two jobs are in Sharpie. No one's taking those jobs from those players like those two held it down over their prime years in Buffalo. There's no reason for me to sit here today and say that any safety on this roster is a lock to start week one. So the opportunity is absolutely there for Derek Forrest.
coming into March, coming into this entire offseason, really, I said the only locked-in starter out of this whole group is Taylor Rapp at safety. Now I'm not so sure about that, honestly, after the signing of Derek Forrest.
And they like Rapp. There was a reason they re-signed him after the 2023 season, and they had him starting. They like his game. They liked how much he developed in his first season, kind of coming off of the bench. But
Yes.
the injuries are concerning. There's been a lot of big games where he has not been able to suit up, and it's cost the
Concussions,
Bills in
especially.
the end. Concussions, yeah, and he plays. I don't want to say a reckless style, but he plays a very
Physical.
physical
Yes.
style, and that takes its toll on players.
Moving on. Now, unfortunately, we have to skew negative just for a few moments here. In your opinion, in your eyes, where has Brandon Beane missed the mark the most? It could be similar to first question, specific signing situation, anything. Maybe someone he hasn't signed. Where has he missed the mark the most this entire free agency period so far, in your opinion?
Well, it'd probably be the two biggest needs that they have on this team right now at one tech and at cornerback. And at the one technique position, they really haven't added anyone to the room. They were looking at Leaky Fotu, if I might be butchering the name. He ends up signing with the Raiders. That was like really their first sign of interest in a player. And they can't go out in that first wave and sign some of the defensive tackles for what they were going for. And there's still lower end players, Benito Jones and things like that if they really wanted to pre-draft, post-draft, they could sign them. But that's one area, and I'd be stunned if they didn't add a one tech in this draft class, maybe with their first or second pick, in fact, that high. But cornerback, too, has also been very disappointing to me. And I kind of alluded to that earlier when we were talking about Benford. They trade away Kyer Elam.
Yes.
Fine with that. He wasn't fitting in this system. They've gone through two different cornerbacks coaches. Jamil Adai really coached him up this past season, and it still didn't really make a ton of difference in that game. Rasul Douglas kind of fell off a cliff last year. He came in at the trade deadline 2 years ago, played very, very well. Interception machine, made a lot of plays. This past season was giving up a lot of receptions, just kind of a half step or a step too slow a lot of the time. So he has not been re-signed, and he's still sitting there on the market. But while I'm okay with both of those moves, not signing Rasul Douglas and trading away Kyer Elam, right now all they've really done is added Dane Jackson into the mix. And Jackson knows the system. He's a reliable guy. He's not someone that I want out there in meaningful snaps, though. I want him as the first guy off the bench if you need someone in a pinch, not someone that is going to be starting consistently across from Christian Benford. I still think they could go and get a Stephon Gilmore in free agency. They can draft someone, but the draft is a crapshoot. There's a reason why Elam's not on this team anymore. And Benford, a guy that they took several rounds later in that draft class, was like a week one starter as a rookie and hasn't looked back since. There's no rhyme or reason for it. So maybe they hit on a corner again in this draft and they start as a rookie just like Benford did, and it's great. But those are two areas where they really do need to address the position via draft and even after the draft.
Yeah, Ryan, it sounds like we're on the same page here because Brandon Beane has missed the mark. In my opinion, I think you'll agree, Brandon Beane has been too complacent at corner. Other than Christian Benford on the outside and Taron Johnson in the slot, what do we really have here? Rasul Douglas, gone. Kyer Elam, gone. And those are whatever anyway, even if they were still here. And then Jamarcus Ingram is nothing more than a special teams fill in here and there, so a key reserve. And Dane Jackson, I just don't like the whole vibes of it. I don't really understand it. To me, it's going back to too much of the same again. I want this position to be overhauled and younger and cheaper, if you will. Even though he's not too expensive, like Dane Jackson's never been a favorite of mine all those years in Buffalo. Like like you mentioned, as a CB3-4, he's fine, but you don't want him on the field whatsoever. My point is, I basically wanted a lot of change here, and I don't know what bring back Dane Jackson accomplished. I don't know if I'm way off on that, but to me, it's just too much of the same once again.
I think they prioritized the defensive line and wide receiver, and they gave out big money contracts at those positions. And if you can win up front with your D line, it helps on the back end. I get that. But I am with you that they haven't done enough at corner.
Can we just get Asante Samuel Jr. on the team already?
He's still out there. He is a viable option. There's the shoulder stinger issue with him that I think a lot of teams might be worried about. So it might have to be a contract. He might have to accept a contract where there's a lot of incentives. So it would probably be a 1-year deal. He probably wants to, have his stock get reset. And if he can stay healthy an entire season and play well in a system, then he can go out and make a lot more money elsewhere or with the Bills or whoever signs him this season. So he is definitely in play. The one concern with Samuel, other than the injuries, is he's not the greatest tackler. And Sean McDermott loves cornerbacks that tackle well. So at the end of the day, he's an upgrade over what they have on this roster, though, and that might be enough for the Bills to maybe pursue him.
Yeah, he's still available, like well into March, almost darn near April at this point. I think we can all say comfortably that injury with the Chargers last year is a lot more serious than any of us could have imagined, basically.
Yep.
What is your taking a look at the whole 10,000-foot view of scope of the roster as a whole? What is your specifically most improved position group right after the big waves of free agency right now?
I'll go with edge position. Joey Bosa has to stay healthy, and that's a big if. He has not been able to stay healthy the last few years. But if they get a healthy Joey Bosa, they're going to get someone that's likely going to reach double-digit sacks. It's a huge ask, but I loved the contract. It's a 1-year. They're not locked into this deal like they were the Von Miller contract, which 6 years, that was really 3 years, but you were locked in for 3 years. This is a 1 year. Let's roll the dice and see what he brings. Because we know that when healthy, he is a game wrecker. He is a difference maker. The suspension to Hoyt certainly, hurts that signing a little bit, but overall, it's a 3-year contract. I love the versatility of the player. Started out in this league as a 300-plus pound defensive tackle, slimmed down to 260 something. Showed that he could drop into coverage, show that he can rush off the edge. You can kick him into tackle on obvious pass rush downs. There's so much to his game that I could see Bobby Babbage using him like a movable chess piece. Mind you, that'll have to wait until week 7 of this season, and then hopefully the 2 years after that. It's a 3-year, $21 million deal that's really more like a 2-year, $14 million deal. Mm-hmm. So again, they're not locked in for an extremely long time. If he plays great, though, this first half of the season, and then obviously that second year, locking him in for that third season at $7 million is going to be a huge discount for the team, and they're going to look pretty smart for signing him to that deal.
Yeah, I understand the points you're saying, but my most improved position personally is wide receiver after the big waves of free agency. Now, I know they only added one notable name here, so okay, Aiden, big deal. But that one notable name I really love. I don't know if you agree, but coming into this offseason, the Buffalo Bills clearly needed one specific skill set, at wide receiver this offseason. They needed a true man beater on the outside who could separate and get open downfield with ease. They didn't have that, but now I think Josh Palmer fits that to a T. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so he is a separator via route running. He is a great route runner. So he's going to be able to create separation that way. The Bills do need that. Khalil Shakir was their best separator, but his overall separation grade was not terrific last year. Obviously, you saw the production, though. The production was still there. He catches everything that's thrown his way. Keon Coleman is not a separator. He was among the worst, if not the worst, last season. He's going to be that 50-50 ball. Curtis Samuel can create separation with his speed, but it's a health issue, and can he stay healthy and do that? So bringing someone in, though, that can get open consistently with the route running off, right off the line, that would be huge for Josh Allen. He needs a player like that. And he's had some guys like that in the past. Cole Beasley comes to mind, being able to get open quickly off the line. John Brown at times, especially early in his tenure, could do that. So you want players like that. And I think Palmer coming in can certainly add to that wide receiver room quite a bit.
Now, I know people are going to look at the stats and say, oh, he's never had overly great production in the NFL. Let's not forget that in 3 out of 4 years in Los Angeles for the Chargers, Josh Palmer had 3 different offensive coordinators every single year, and he also was behind Keenan Allen and Mike Williams every single year. So there's external factors here that can get you excited, and everything needs to provide context, especially with this Josh Palmer production.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it on the offensive coordinators. That's 3 different systems in 4 years. That's very difficult for any player. And then the talent in front of him limited his opportunities.
Yes. Last thing here before we get out of here for tonight. Again, I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
But again, another 10,000 foot view. I'm going to start with you. Top 3 needs after the first big waves of free agency for the Bills remaining right now. I guess to keep the suspense going. Let's start with your number 3.
Because number 3 is the one I'm going back and forth on right now. I guess
you
if
can
I
mention them together if you'd like.
Okay, well, let me think about this real quick. I have 1 and 2 in my mind. So for number 3, I could go with wide receiver. I still think they need to add another wide out to this room. As much as I like, we mentioned how much we like Derek Forrest and they believe in Taylor Rapp. Safety is up there for me for that number 3 spot, as is edge rusher. So those would be my 3 positions in terms of they got to go out and do something there. So for the sake of it, I'm going to say wide receiver. Add another guy to this group. You want someone that I'm not saying go out and pick 30 or even with one of their second round picks and bring in a wide receiver. But in the 4th round, go get a Kyle Williams.
He's my day 3 guy. Yeah.
He can run a 4.4, and it wouldn't surprise me if his stock rose enough where he was a day 2 pick, and maybe the Bills miss out on him because they don't have a 3rd round pick. But go get a guy with 4.4 speed. There's Ty Felton's in day 3. He's more of a slot guy, but he ran a 4.38, I believe, somewhere in that range. So you can get someone that, okay, he's not going to be an every down player, but when we need that big play threat, he might be able to come in and help because Palmer, route running, can get open. Curtis Samuel has some speed to his game, but you want that one difference maker for those shots from time to time. So that would be my number 3.
Okay, my formal number 3, you mentioned it, is defense end / pass rusher. It sounds like, my audience and fans already know this, but it sounds like I'm not particularly as high in Joey Bosa as you are. Don't get me wrong. He's been a productive player his whole career, but old and injured, generally not a good combo.
Fair.
And especially after the Michael Hoyt suspension now for the first 6 games, that pushes Joey Bosa into a position into a level of snaps where I'm not comfortable giving him. I don't know how you feel, but I'm not comfortable giving him those level of snaps now. He's going to have to play now if they don't add someone else with the Hoyt suspension.
And all valid points. And it's more so the contract I love for Bosa more than the player. The player does scare me because of the injuries. The Bills rotate their defensive linemen so much. I still don't think he's going to get this overwhelming percentage of snaps. So that is the one thing I'll say. I think they're going to be opportunities for Javon Solomon, AJ Epinesa. You kind of know what you're getting in his game, but he'll have those opportunities. And then, like you said, add a rookie to this mix, and all of a sudden you might be able to be more than okay for those first 6 weeks of the year. But certainly makes sense to have defensive end right there for that number 3 spot.
Piggybacking off of that, I'm going to throw out my number 2 here is defensive tackle. Outside of Ed Oliver, who, by the way, quietly had a disappointing season, but whatever. A bit for another day. Other than him, Daquan Jones, old and clear regression. Dwayne Carter, after his injury, was inactive, totally ineffective, whatever. Jordan Phillips, Austin Johnson, Quentin Jefferson, not that they were particularly good at all, but those are at least bodies you have. You don't even need starters here. You also just need literal camp bodies. So I think you need to invest 2 or 3 multiple day 2 and day 3 picks in the draft. That's just what I'm thinking, especially at one tech as a true run stuffer to have Ed Oliver a bounce back season. But is that your number 2 as well? Do you have some go in a different direction?
Yeah, I'm pretty much a 1A, 1B at this point with defensive tackle and cornerback. And you laid out the defensive tackle points very well. Ed Oliver, I think stat-wise, absolutely a down year compared to the previous season. I still think he did a lot of things very well when you watched him on tape. And it was a little deceiving when you said, man, the splash plays just weren't there like the year before that.
Yeah, no.
He was still playing pretty well overall, but Jones is Again, he's a player that he looked his age last season. You were hoping he's going to bounce back after the injury. He obviously came back the season before that, but very late in the year. But you thought a full off season, he might look healthy. He might make those explosive plays again. He just didn't. So there is a depth issue at both spots. You mentioned Carter, wrist injury. After that, he was really ineffective, had trouble getting onto the field. They bring in Larry
Wasn't even playing.
Ogunjobi. I thought Ogunjobi, when they signed him, was a smart move, knowing obviously before knowing about the suspension, because I thought, okay, this is a player that is going to push Carter for that backup job behind Ed Oliver. And if Ogunjobi wins, fine. He's a veteran, but he fits into the 4-3 scheme better than what he had been playing in Pittsburgh. He's someone that you can rely on, and then maybe by the end of the season, Carter can take that job back. But now he's suspended the first 6 games. There's more on Carter's plate. They might need to maybe re-sign after the draft and Ilianku, who can never seem to like make the final roster, stay on that final roster.
I don't know what it is. Yeah,
But they do like him, or maybe love him a lot as a player. He does make splash plays when given opportunities. It's weird, it's bizarre. And then the one tech, that is a huge area for me where I would take 2 one techs in this draft class. Even if the first pick is Grant, day 3, I'm bouncing back with another one for depth, because I know that Jones isn't going to be here much longer and going to be able to produce much longer. So we've seen the Bills do this before. We mentioned the Benford Elam double dipping at cornerback. We've seen them double dip at various positions many, many years ago. They double dipped when they took John McCargo in round 1 and then Kyle Williams in round 5. So it can be done, and I think it should be done if you're the Bills this year.
Yeah. Number 1, and at this point in my mind, it's like a 1A, 1B, like you said, but corner's my formal number 1. We touched on earlier outside Benford on the outside. Terrence Johnson's the slot, but more so outside. What do you really have? So, in my opinion, at pick 30th overall, quick caveat, unless Matthew Golden, some miraculously, grace of God is there somehow, I think it's highly unlikely that he's long gone by then. I think they need to take the best defensive player on their board, whether it's corner, edge, or defensive tackle, whatever. Just take the best one. Where are you at with that?
I think that I agree completely with that. And even if Golden were to somehow fall to the Bills, I'm still going with that. I like Golden. I like his game. But Josh Allen showed last season that he can move the ball and put up points without an elite number 1 type of receiver. You can go back in round 2 and you could probably get an Isaiah Bond. You could get a Jalen Royals. There's so many players that you could get on day 2 or even day 3 of this draft that I think could come in and contribute to that wide receiver room, where there's a pressing need at cornerback right now. Trey Amos makes sense for this team. There's some day 2, early day 3 options. I don't know how many of those first round corners are still going to be there come pick 30. The Bills might have to get aggressive to move up for one if that is their main priority or target. But no, I'm with you at pick 30. I'm taking the best defensive player on the board.
Yeah, and I take him at 30. This guy I'm about to mention. I'm a big fan of Maxwell Hairston personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then the speed's undeniable.
Yeah, the combine stuff. I know this wasn't planned out, but I wanted to ask you at this early stage with like prospect visits and stuff you've been talking about recently on social platforms. Is there any Bills visits that they have brought in a few prospects that you can share with us quickly?
So nothing that's not already out there. Isaiah Bond is making a top 30 or pre-draft visit with the Bills. They're doing their homework on him. They had dinner with him. They were at his pro day. They want to have him in for a visit. They talked to him at the combine. So they're checking all the boxes to see what this kid's all about. And then there was a UCLA edge rusher today that was announced by a few different outlets. So they're looking there. His stock's rising too. I think he's probably a day 2 pick at this point.
Femio.
So those are the 2 that we know. The Bills, I will say, do a ton of Zoom interviews, and those are starting to kind of come out a little bit. Which, listen, it makes a lot of sense because you only get 30 pre-draft visits.
I was just going to ask, do those count? The Zoom, do those count as the top 30 visits?
Nope. Okay. And you can have as many as you want. So
So in
if you
person, it's top 30.
right to come in for the top 30 of the pre-draft, you have to physically come into Buffalo, and there are some rules to that too. Like if you're a UB prospect, they don't count against the top 30.
Yeah, yeah.
Penn State players used to not count against the top 30. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but Penn State
Proximity thing. Yeah.
players, yeah, that local, I think that is still the case, but I would have to double check on that. So there's some workarounds to it, but yeah, the Zoom though it's a great workaround. I want to talk to this player again. Talk to him as many
Yeah.
times as you want.
Who cares? Yeah.
Right.
Well, Ryan, this was a great conversation that I thoroughly enjoyed. Thank you for contributing your time out of your schedule. Please let everyone know where they can find your work and best support you as we move towards the draft and the rest of the offseason going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on all social media platforms at Ryan Talbot Bills. You can find my work at Syracuse.com and NYUp.com. And you can find Shout the Buffalo Football Podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And we also go live on YouTube, X, and Facebook.
Yeah. Well, before we sign off here, thank you, Ryan. For Ryan Talbot, Aiden Wagoner, we're out. Have a great day.